Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. We have an amazing show for you. Today, we are back in beautiful Washington, D.C. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed, we do. And thank you to everyone who tuned in for the live stream out of New York City. We had a blast. The comments on it were really positive. So we'll be looking for more opportunities to do
we're going to do stuff like that again.
Yeah, it was a fun format. I think people enjoyed how we switched it up. In the show today, all right, big moves with regard to Elon Musk and Twitter and total media freakout about the whole thing, which is very revealing in many ways. We also have some new comments from Joe Biden's pollster, who helped him to win the presidency, saying that this is the worst political environment for Democrats that he has ever seen, which I think is just, pretty undeniable, but for him to admit it. He had some interesting comments here. Also, movement on the stock ban for members of Congress. We'll tell you what the sort of sticking points are and where that lies in the process. New news about CNN Plus. And
you guys know we can't resist.
How much the wheels are already coming off, big layoffs and budget cuts already planned. We also have Jordan Chariton in the show for an update on union efforts and union busting efforts over with Amazon. Okay, a couple other announcements for you here, guys. First of all, we are not going to do a normal show on Thursday. We will have content to post every single day like we normally do. I unfortunately have suffered a death in the family, so I'm going to be attending a funeral, and it is Saagar's birthday.
Yeah, that's right.
So, and Marshall is not available to fill in, so we just said, you know what, guys, we're going to call it this week.
We tried our best.
Yeah, we tried our best, but we're going to record a bunch of extra stuff, so we won't leave you high and dry. Another thing that we will reveal at the end of the show, we have at long last gotten the lifetime members plaque complete. It is in the studio. It is sitting to my left as we speak right now. It was a very difficult logistical challenge to figure out exactly how to pull this off.
Especially
but we
made in
finally
America.
managed it.
Do you know how hard it is to make stuff in America? We can tell you a whole thing about it. Okay?
Yes, and finally, last announcement before we start the show is thank you to James for putting together the newsletter. We're going to continue forward with that because he seems to like doing it and you guys seem to like getting it. So.
Our premium guys really love it.
Yeah.
It is reminder, it's basically a written roundup of the entire show, includes all the links, all of the elements that are within here. So if you want to check our stuff, what exactly that we're citing, and go and read deeper for yourself, that is something that we make available to our premium members. We want to make the show not only to be able to watch, to listen, but in order to consume it in the best environment possible for you. So something we've been working on for a long time, and I hope you guys really enjoy it.
Yeah, and by the way, guys, we have some other announcements coming up this week, new partnerships we're continuing to look into to expand more content, more people, more folks in the circle of friends here over at
the Breaking Points Extended Universe.
The extended family here, so stay tuned for that. All right, with all of that out of the way, let's get to the very latest in terms of Russia's war in Ukraine. President Biden making some new comments, continuing to up the rhetorical ante in ways that I personally find to be less than productive. Let's take a listen to his latest comments.
I called it genocide because it's become clearer and clearer that Putin is just trying to wipe out the idea of even being able to be a Ukrainian. And the evidence is mounting. It's different than it was last week. The more evidence is coming out of literally the horrible things that the Russians have done in Ukraine.
So here's the trajectory, guys. You remember first, President Biden made some comments off the cuff that Putin was a war criminal. Then he sort of codifies it, puts out an official statement, really leans into that. So it wasn't just, one sort of flippant comment. Then he says he wants him to actually be tried as a war criminal, something that our own war criminals have never subjected themselves to. And now we are moving up the chain of rhetorical escalation here, saying that what Russia is engaged in Ukraine is, in fact, genocide. And just to put the definition of genocide out there, because sometimes we throw these terms around loosely without really thinking through what they are and what they mean. It was a Jewish-Polish legal scholar who coined the term in 1944. And he said that the term doesn't necessarily signify mass killings. More often, genocide refers to a coordinated plan aimed at destruction of the essential foundations of the life of national groups so that these groups wither and die like plants that have suffered a blight. I think that certainly could apply to what is happening in Ukraine right now. So I'm not saying that the term is inaccurate. in terms of, Putin has clearly not just a war on Ukrainian soil and a desire to annex parts, if not all, of the country, but also really denies that Ukraine is even a thing. So there is some justification here, but the broader picture, as we always try to point out, is that, look, ultimately we want there to be peace. We want there to be a negotiated settlement. We want there to be an end to the violence. And it's very clear from the president's words and from the administration's posture that they're not really interested in that. And Saagar, we talked last week in New York about Ron Klain also made some comments on a podcast. He said, I don't want an exit ramp for Vladimir Putin. I don't think that's our concern. Our concern is punishing the Russian aggression and defending the rights of the Ukrainians to have the kind of future that they deserve. No one is denying the Ukrainians deserve to be free. They deserve peace. They deserve all of that. But when you don't want an exit ramp for Vladimir Putin, that means you don't want peace. That means you actually want Ukraine to continue suffering. And we're going to bring you some more reports on the civilian casualties here. You want this war to continue because you're more interested in punishing Russia than ultimately reaching a settlement here.
Yeah, and look, the words of a president matter. That was the very first thing that Joe Biden said whenever he was running for president. In 2019, you can all go back and watch his announcement video. But here's the problem. The enduring legacy of never again is burned into all of us. And I think that's a good thing. I actually do. Post-World War II, we decided that it was a just cause that 400,000 Americans died in order to restore both peace in Europe and to stop the genocide of Hitler and the Nazis. The greatest regret of the United States in the 1990s is that they didn't do anything whenever it came to the genocide in Rwanda. And that is why, at the time, if you go back, the Clinton administration refused to use the word genocide. There's a famous clip of Susan Rice refusing to use the word from the podium at the State Department. And the reason why was because if we acknowledged it as a quote-unquote genocide, that would require and compel action on behalf of the United States. So there's actually a two-pronged problem here. If this is a genocide and we do nothing about it, then that begs the question, why aren't we doing the maximalist approach? Why are we not bombing, whichever Russian contingent is responsible for the war crimes in Bucha? Why are we not, taking out chemical weapons factories or denigrating the Russian ability to wage war? Now, there's a grand strategic reason we're not doing that. It's because Russia is a nuclear power, and because doing so would very likely invite a major escalation between a war between NATO and the United States. And so Biden needs to choose his words more carefully towards an actual strategic aim. Instead, he's speaking aimlessly. Putin is a war criminal. This is a genocide, and he doubles down on genocide.
Yeah. The thing is, I don't think it is aimless. I think it's very intentional because they don't have any intention of bringing this thing to a close. I mean, that's just become increasingly clear. At the beginning, I was sort of 50-50, whether it was just, they're just reacting and bumbling through and it's just all response to whatever's happening in the moment. But I think it's become increasingly clear that their only goal here ultimately is to punish Russian aggression to the point that Putin gets pushed out of power. I mean, that's what Biden let slip in that famous moment that, they kind of cleaned up, they kind of walked back, and then he kind of also leaned into. I think that was revealing what the true aim is here, and I think that that's foolish. I don't think it's going to happen, and ultimately I think it's going to contribute to even more Ukrainian suffering. And so that's really the issue here is I think that the U.S. administration is really actively standing in the way of peace at this point and guaranteeing that we are going to enter this new Cold War era of a new Iron Curtain and a new world divided and a new conflict and competition, which is wonderful if you're an arms dealer or weapons manufacturer. It's wonderful for the neocons here in this country. It's, their greatest dream. But it's a disaster if you actually care about a sort of, if you actually care about peace, it's ultimately a disaster.
Yeah, to me, it's all about ambiguity, which is that whenever Biden leaves terms open like genocide and war criminal, he is inviting a position of the United States in order to use military force. This is something that we all know in our DNA, rightfully. We're good people. We don't want to see people massacred across the planet. But when you use rhetoric like that, and by the way, it's not just me saying that. I've heard even from many, even quote unquote, like moderate type interventionists. Marshall's one of these people. Yeah. And he was denigrating the Biden administration. He's like, you can't say that because if you say that, you are saying the United States should be bringing the full force of its power. We have shameful times in our legacy, turning away Jewish refugees in the 1930s in order to not antagonize the Hitler regime. I mean, remember, these are things which we've all been taught correctly in graduate school as a black mark. And so when you, as the president of the United States and the leader of the free world, use this type of rhetoric, you justify and actually open yourself up to the question of, well, why are you not taking direct military action in order to stop this? And we know why that answer is, and we should acknowledge that repeatedly.
Right, that's right. And that's why you see actually a majority of American people saying we're not doing enough.
Yeah.
Even though we have taken extraordinary actions, both in terms of, you know, the weapons support, the intelligence support we've provided to them, the training we've provided to the Ukrainian military over years and years now, and of course the economic warfare that is of almost unprecedented scale that we have launched against Russia at this point. That's how you get to a place where you can have taken all of those extraordinary and some of them, I think, foolish and morally wrong actions and still have people feel like, yeah, but you're not doing enough. It's because from the beginning of this conflict, you've had a certain contingent here in Washington who was perfectly willing and comfortable to say, this is World War II again, this is Putin again, this is, you know, and to throw around language like genocide, which, as you said, you know, Americans are good people. The country has not, certainly the leadership has not lived up to the values that America is supposed to be all about, but the American people, by and large, really do believe in those values and support those values. So when you casually use those terms, it does absolutely open the door for people saying, okay, then why aren't we doing more? Why aren't we, isn't this a just cause? Why aren't we using our men and women to stop the atrocities here?
Right, and look, I mean, I just have to repeat it again, which is that, yes, what can happen in Ukraine is horrific. What's going on there is like catastrophic. And Biden's not descriptively wrong whenever he says that Putin does not acknowledge Ukrainian identity as a sovereign people. This is a long time coming in the history of not just Russia, many of these subordinate peoples to Russia. I mean, I actually just saw a fascinating thing today about Russian troops from eastern Siberia who are Buddhist. You know, it's like, and they're being conscripted and deployed to Ukraine.
Really? Wow.
Like, what do these steppe people have an interest in fighting in Ukraine? You know, it's like, this is ludicrous. So many people have different types of ethnic groups have long suffered under the great Russian thumb. However, that doesn't mean that we should risk a nuclear war in order to try and intervene within that country. And when you use language like this, I'll just repeat it again, the words of a president legitimately do matter. Yeah. And just so you know, it's bipartisan because President Donald Trump also called it a genocide the day after, and he called it a Holocaust previously.
Yeah, and we've called on his rhetoric as well.
And we should call on that rhetoric. So when you have the two leading political figures in the United States, it depresses me to say that they're the two, but they are, of the two factions, and the president and the former president, likely next president, you put that together, it's not a good situation for U.S. policy, and you have to understand the broader implications of the machine that whirs up here in D.C. But they're at this,
well, the last thing I want to say about this too is just on the hypocrisy front. Of course, we've talked about a lot about Saudi and Yemen, but if you're following the news out of Israel, how you can apply the term genocide to Russia's aggression against Ukraine and not what Israel has been doing to Palestine for decades, I don't think you're applying an even standard there. Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.